As Nigeria prepares for the 2023 national elections, there are possibilities that incoming government may inherit a depleted treasury. Economic experts say Nigerians may need to brace up for a much more harsh economic climate, as there are reports that the country's external reserves amount to only $15 billion, which is well below the $36 billion balance on the gross external reserves disclosed by the Central Bank of Nigeria. With the country spending 5.9 trillion naira on imports in the first quarter of the year, irrespective of the preferred exchange rate, reserves of $15 billion will barely cover 4 months of import. In addition to this, what makes Nigeria's economic situation worse is the divestment of oil assets held by the international oil companies. There are mixed concerns that the decision could worsen oil exploration or, in a fit of hope, spur more exploration activities by indigenous companies. And this can be attributed to complaints by the IOCs of increasing sabotage, community crisis, insecurity, oil theft, and most recently a rising global withdrawal of financing for fossil fuel activities in solidarity for actions meant to tackle climate change. What are the implications of Nigeria's economic frailties on the 2023 general elections? What are the crucial issues political actors should be discussing in the light of this? We've assembled a panel of economic experts on the program to offer solutions. I'm Somna Sambo, and this is the Arise interview. A very warm welcome to the show. Now, as the economy faces a severe downturn, President Muhammadu Buhari, state governors and other top officials are said to have been made aware of the severity of the crisis, and some of them are already pressing the federal government to adopt specific measures to stem the crisis in the economy and address security threats. That is, the governors. There's now an economic rescue package proposed to provide fiscal stability, such as cutting federal expenditure by 8 trillion naira in the short term, immediate action to restore fiscal discipline, cutting the cost of governance across the 3 tiers of government, abandoning the fixed exchange rate policy, among others. Now, about 7 trillion naira of the expected cut in public expenditure is fully dependent on ending the controversial subsidy on petrol. State governors are also advising the federal government to offer federal civil servants who are older than 50 years a one-off retirement package to exit the service, as part of coordinated efforts to instill fiscal discipline and prevent the nation from imminent economic collapse. But what are the new frontiers for revenue streams in the face of the revenue shortfalls that we've had as a country? Well, joining us to analyze the issues and provide a insight into the sort of solutions necessary to rejig the Nigerian economy, we'll be starting with Dr. Emeka Okengwu, who is a development economist and a former consultant with the World Bank. And of course, we will be moving on to other experts as the show goes on. So let's start with you, Dr. Okengwu. How much of a big problem are we in Nigeria when it comes to the economy? And do you think that some of these solutions being provided by some of the public officials are good enough?
Actually, they worsen it. And I mean, let's not talk about where we are now. When did we get there? We've been there for the past 10 years. And we didn't take any proactive measures. We've just been reacting to issues as they were. Or like I want to say, we've been using money, to throw out fire. So what we've basically done is to throw money at these fires, if you may, in parentheses, by just, introducing interventionist programs and, supposed to be reaching very fictitious people. And why do I use the word fictitious? Because first, if you have any understanding of economic development and economic planning, the first thing you do is to talk about how cogent your statistics are. So it's not even about statistics, it's about cogent and reliable statistics. And 2 ways you get cogent and reliable statistics is that either you do a scoping study or you do a pre-feasibility that can now be able to lead you to what you call a bankable solution program. Have we done any of this in the past 15, 20 years?
We've seen the National Bureau of Statistics actually helping to standardize the statistics that we get in the country. And of course, the government says the social investment programs have been well targeted because it has been able to harness and provide data that's targeted at those who really need this.
Now you landed where I thought you were going to land. The MBS is actually one of the biggest issues we have. And I tell you why. Because you see, when you're talking about statistics that are reliable, it has to be drawn from source. And I want to ask a question. In your village, in your local government, in your state, how many MBS offices do you have there? So if you're not getting MBS in every local government, how are they now generating this real time, from source data? That's a very big question. That's a very big issue. Okay, it's something we glance over because, you have these laws. Nobody has ever interrogated the source of those statistics. Nobody has ever said, okay, MBS, how do you generate this? Do you have capacity to be able to do online real-time, data gathering?
Sorry to just cut you
Yeah.
We've seen even the World Bank and the UN are relying more on statistics provided by the National Bureau of Statistics, because over time, there's been an improvement.
This is where we're in trouble. Because when your data source is not cogent, when your data source cannot be interrogated, when your data source does not come from real-time sources, then you're in trouble. You see, because let me tell you, where I come from, they said if evil persists for some period of time, it becomes culture. Okay, because nobody has interrogated where we're actually generating our primary source data from and what we're doing with this data. It becomes, it's become a Bible of data. But
so
I'm saying that
we have a data problem too.
We have a faulty, reliable. I'm using the word reliable and cogent and bankable data. In the first place, what will be the most important when you're planning for a community? Wouldn't it be the population? Wouldn't it be the population of people? Wouldn't it be, and how do you get this population growth if you do not have a reliable database of your birth and death? You and I, were born in public hospitals, and I can tell you, if you go back to the hospital, as old as the files may be, they can pull out, your file and give to your mom. All right? Because at that point in time, the general hospitals were in charge of all those data. I want you to do a vox pop, and then let's even know what's happening to this data of birth and death. Where do they generate it from?
All right,
so
and we come back to our focal point, the economy. We're in deep trouble based on what we've seen and heard at the moment, but of course the government seems to be providing some solutions. And I'm asking you, when the government is saying that it needs to cut off 8 trillion naira of our expenditure, and 7 trillion naira of that will have to come from the suspension of fuel subsidy, do you think this government has the willpower to be able to take such a decision? And the governors are also saying that, look, anyone who's 50 and above in the Federal Civil Service should just be given a severance package to go home.
See,
what do you make of this?
Again, this is a governor that travels in 15, 20 cars. These are governors that have cars and houses wherever. These are people that run on diesel from morning till night. Okay? Then you're saying that thing that is making Nigerians still feel that they're Nigerian, because the moment you remove fuel subsidy, you can no longer buy a cup of garri, for 1,000 naira. Do you know why? Because of the cost of transporting that cup of garri or bag of garri from, I just want to be elementary about this. We don't even have any mass transportation means. So whatever it is that you're transporting on that transport, human, material, whatever, is going to be taking that fuel cost.
So it doesn't look feasible.
What we should have been talking about alternatives. In a country that has the amount of gas we have, alternative energy sources we have, why aren't we looking at electric vehicles? Why aren't we looking at the CNG vehicles that's very popular all over the place?
Well, the government started that CNG program, although it hasn't taken root fully the way a lot of Nigerians had thought. And the expenditure for such, the conversion process itself seems to be a bit tedious.
You'll be shocked that it is very, very simple. It's as simple as the same gas your wife has in your kitchen. It's the same thing. It's the same cylinder. It's the same technology. Remembering that what we're talking about is something that can be able to turn, the crankshaft of your vehicle. It's all about heat and exchange of heat. So if we want to interrogate what the matters are, we need to be able to interrogate it, end to end. We should think them through. So that when you're now preferring solutions, why would anybody be talking about removing subsidy when you can just ignore the petrol thing and then, leave it to market forces and give people alternatives? What about electricity? What about, the electric vehicles, my brother? So you see, what's important is that we are not thinking our country through. And like I said in my intro, look at the headlines of your paper today. A country that had, in 12 years, 222 near and total collapse of our energy systems. That's very close to living in hell. If you understand what that means.
How about the suggestion about those who are 50 and above should, just be given some severance package?
I don't know how old you are. I'm very close to 60. I'm still healthy. I mean,
that's a good
people are
solution?
graduating because of, the ASU crisis at 35 and 45. Some people are still in school at 40. Not as they have their own fault, but because of the faulty education system you have. So when you now ask that guy to retire and you pay him off, what's he going to do with that money you're going to pay him? He can't even pay his rent. None of us can pay our rents. If we need to live in places we think, we should live and be comfortable, nobody can afford it. Not one director can afford the rent of a 5-bedroom duplex or 4-bedroom duplex in Abuja and his salary. Not one person. And I dare, for you to prove me wrong. Ditto for me and you sitting down here. So, if we want to be real, this is our country. And we must be able to, a governor comes and says, oh, let us remove fuel subsidy. And then do what?
Okay, and we haven't heard the government officials talking about reducing the size of government. Why do you think that this is not being on the table? I mean, we've seen other countries even cutting the cost for vehicle allowance, or even pushing that away. Some even cutting down the cost of the parliament by reducing the legislature into just a unicameral one instead of the bicameral that we practice. And then we've seen some presidencies actually cut down on their staff. And all of that, having a lean government, how come it looks like our government is not embracing even an IT sort of government to reduce the size of government?
We don't have a social contract. We don't even know, government does not even know what is up and against. Okay, in a country where you have statistics showing that about 84 million people are living under the breadline, I mean, it simply means they are poorer than poor. That's what that means. And then you have programs that are showing that you've been able to assist 20,000 people. And then, you're showing it on television screens. It simply means that there's no social contract. There's nothing we can interrogate. Do you understand what I'm saying? So the moment, you see, it's not about criticizing government. In the first place, I have said this severally. Why do we need 36 states when less than 2 or 3 or 4 of them, or 12 at max, are functioning? Why don't you go back to those ways and then recreate, these old traditional relationships that you find out that states are contiguous are better together. I mean, everybody wants to be governor. Every governor wants to live large. Every governor wants to live, even those that cannot even, generate a cent. But you'll be shocked, sir, that those states we think can generate money are actually the richest vis-a-vis the natural resources. So it's all about us not understanding that resources can only become useful to you when you turn them into capital. Ditto for human beings. And this is the problem we have. In case you do not, a lot of people might not know this, Yobe State has one of the biggest, if not the biggest deposit of bentonite, which is a key mineral for oil drilling. Over 900 million found in a location. Not one ton, not even 1 kg of it in production. Okay, ditto for so many other states that you have the poorest of Nigerians. Now you have 36 million hectares, of land.
Arable land.
Well, they say arable. Now, what statistics makes them arable? You don't even have one commercial farm. One.
No, I mean, a lot of people dispute that.
Can I tell you what a commercial farm is?
If you go towards the Lagos Ibadan axis,
please go to South Africa. You see farms that are watering with jets. They're watering with airplanes. Those are commercial farms. There are farms you need to fly to be able to fly across the length and breadth of our farm. They are not even seen as big farms because they are still at the level of plantations. Farm has gone into what they call belts. Yeah. So we must tell ourselves
that. I mean, you must be making comparison with the sort of farm that Jimmy Carter, former president, US president, has. A peanut farm that's about 8,000 square kilometers.
That's the farm you need for 200 million people, my brother. It is only then you can, against that output, begin to look at your energy cost. Begin to look at your transportation cost. Begin to look at your storage cost. Begin to look at your human capital, and then begin to look at your value cost. Out of those 8,000 hectares of land, okay, that might give you 1 million or 2 million tons of peanuts, you can begin to build, an industrial complex for peanut production. So until you begin to think that way, and that's why I'm saying that the first thing is that we don't even know how many people we need to feed.
Okay, I'll ask you to hold on there while we go on a short break.
Thank you.
And when we come back, we'll be joined by other economic experts to help us understand the sort of issues that we are in as a nation economically, and then, of course, what sort of solutions that should be targeted towards resolving them. Stay with us. Welcome back from the break. You're still watching the Arise interview, and I'm Somna Sambo. Now, joining us in the studio to discuss all of this is Arise News analyst, Dr. Sam Amadi, who is also an associate professor of law. And of course, we have another economist, Akin Ogunshola, who's joining us from our offsite studio. And of course, Dr. Emeka Okengwu, who is a development economist and a former consultant with the World Bank, is still here with us, helping us to understand all of these issues. And I'll come to you, Dr. Sam Amadi, from the perspectives of what we are seeing being offered as solutions in terms of the need to cut wage bill and then to cut down 7 trillion naira from the fuel subsidy and all of that. Do you think these are feasible solutions at the moment?
The need to cut down to save 7 trillion is the right thing to do. We need to save even more than that. In order to, if you want to provide public goods, whether in terms of social infrastructure, physical infrastructure, you have one of two ways. Either you increase revenue through commercial or non-commercial means, taxation, or you reduce costs. You reduce costs and savings, and those savings are ploughed back into a public expenditure. Now, but the items, where you want to make those savings, for example, talking in terms of laying off workers, I mean, that's not, it's harebrained in my sense, in my view, because one, it's not even feasible. The cost and the mechanism for structuring that exit could be even close to what you want to save. If you look at the payouts, you're going to do biometrics of everybody, capture them well and do that. The second is that the cost of that in terms of socio-economic costs, you're talking about maybe trimming off the bunch of expertise in the civil service. We saw it with 1976, I guess, under Murtala Mohammed, when that is taken as one of the costs, proximate cause of the collapse of professionalism and competence in the public service. And no matter how you run an economy, whether you want to run market economy, you want to run the social market version of it, you need a strong public sector. You need experience with institutional memory. So I think it's not a well-thought idea. Yes, some people have talked about the size of our bureaucracy being too big. I disagree that it's not that too big. It's because it's not productive. You've not structured work that people can do. If you compare our, number of our civil servants number in terms of public service and the size of the country, and compare with Asian countries and other places, it's discovered that it's because of the inefficiency, not necessarily the number. But even if you want to cut down because of the exigency of personnel costs, I mean, when you are using the bulk of your, even borrowed money, we are borrowing money to pay for salaries and wages in the public service, then you probably have to develop a more intelligible criteria. So first, an assessment, a clear audit, which is where manpower, audit, and then you locate some of these skills are probably not needed in those sectors. You can either transition them through retraining and well-structured transition to the private sector to self-employment. That's one of the things to do, because again, if people are taken out of what we've seen from the professional exercise globally, is that public sector not just provide income, they provide stability and provide insurance. When you take people out of public service and you don't transition them into a sustainable income, wage earning or income earning employment, whether self-employment or private sector, you don't just increase poverty, also increase conflict, social crises that go down to undermine development. Okay. So what I see is the problem is that there's this insularity. For years, people have talked about lack of integration. Nigerian policymakers think about external integration, the open market, trade, international trade. But the internal integration of integrating social sector with the economic sector, integrating workers with production, so that you don't just say, let's hive off this, let's just remove workers. What happens to them? How do you destroy purchasing power? Again, if you look at the option against taxation, if you keep taxing people whose minimum wage is really the lowest, in fact, in the first 20 in Africa, Nigeria is not where they are. Kenya, Cote d'Ivoire, their minimum wage in terms of dollar rating is far more than Nigeria. Kenya is about $91 if you look at it per month. Nigeria is about $60. So primarily, these propositions are not well thought out. They're not grounded in a systematic and beyond financial analysis of cost benefits. Look at
Okay.
social, proximate and ultimate impact of this. So I think they're not proper. The need to reduce costs is important, but the items I've chosen, the policy proposals, are clearly not well thought out and would worsen the crisis of poverty and productivity in the country.
And I come to you, Gushola. What sort of new revenue streams should we be looking forward to as a country, considering how IOCs are exiting? I mean, about 20 trillion naira is said to have been lost to the exit of IOCs, though Nigerian indigenous companies are beginning to buy up some of their assets, with President Buhari just approving CEPLA to buy off, the assets of ExxonMobil and all of that. But nonetheless, the monies we've lost is huge here. And then you have 1.6 trillion naira revenue being generated between the first quarter of this year, and then debt service of 1.9. How do we explore new revenue streams for the country in the midst of this revenue problem that we have?
Thank you very much. The problem we have now in Nigeria is not just about generating a new revenue stream. One thing that is affecting the Nigerian economy now is the security situation of the country. If the security situation is not put under control, I tell you, no foreign direct investment will be coming into Nigeria, and investors will not even like to come in. And I can also deduce that many of our investors are actually preferring to invest their capital outside the country because the cost of doing business also in Nigeria is actually getting high. Look at the price of diesel, look at the price of fuel, look at the price of electricity. So many prices have gone up, and you can, if you even recall, the former president, Olusegun Obasanjo, is actually also complaining that is complaining about the high cost of running business in Nigeria, also affecting the agri sector. So those are the challenges that we have. And looking at the other streams of revenue, in spite of all these challenges, I think we need to block the loopholes in terms of tax collection. Tax collection is one of the basic levies that government, gets revenue from. I can tell you that despite that several businesses are actually complaining of, high cost of running their business, there are still some businesses that are not yet captured in TaxNet. Though the FIRS is actually trying their best, trying to expand the TaxNet, ensuring that businesses that their income is less than 25 million are captured into the tax net, though they say they are not going to pay any company income tax, but they will be captured for the purposes of VAT and also withholding taxes and other forms of taxes. There are other taxes also that have not been well administered, like the capital gains tax. We also have the petroleum profit tax, different forms of taxes that will also serve as revenue for government. I think the FRS is what the government need to fall back to now, because oil is no longer profiting, as we have oil thieves that are actually cutting away our oil from the streams. Though thank God for the last meeting of the oil producing countries, they have actually allowed Nigeria to increase production of oil. And I just believe that and I hope that government will help secure the production of oil in Nigeria in order to boost our revenue. There are also, just like Prof said, you mentioned about other mineral resources like the bitumen, the tin. We have the coal even in the southeast that is not yet adequately tapped. These are the other sources that we are looking at. Government needs to actually think out of the box now, because we are now getting to the critical moment in our economy in Nigeria.
Okay, and Dr. Okengwu, I come to you. I mean, it looks like the next president of Nigeria has a whole lot of baggage, economic baggage that he would have to deal with. How do we explore new frontiers of revenue for the nation so that we don't have the next president complaining that, yes, you voted me through popular votes, but unfortunately there's no money for me to work with?
Simple. Science, technology, and innovation. Apply these things to your natural resources and your human capital. You will have a clear, new, variant income sources, revenue sources. And for every local government you mention, I can tell you what's there, vis-a-vis the agro-allied, vis-a-vis the solid minerals. And of course, vis-a-vis the human capital, because we have the numbers. But I tell you what the greatest challenge has been in Nigeria is that we've not been able, like I said to you, to understand how many people we are planning for. Okay, now if you want to develop new economic or energy streams, you must be able to do it against output. If you are going to be, my brother has talked about all the coal in Enugu. I can tell you something. The Port Harcourt port, the Port Harcourt seaport, was built primarily to evacuate coal from Enugu. And that's why the only infrastructure that was in that port until a long time was the coal handling facility there. And against that coal that was found in Enugu, a rail line was built. And of course, a lot of urban cities also came out of it. Now, this is a product of what you call proper planning. I'll come back to what I mean by science, and technology. These days, you do not need, and I keep making this argument, land to be food sufficient. You need technology to be food sufficient. Okay, so the days people went to carry hoe and diggers and knives and all that and rakes and got into the bush, and somebody is saying, okay, we have all these people inside the bush. There's a lot of urban agriculture going on in the UK, even rooftop farming. And this is all about technology. So it's for us to get as innovative as we can get right now. If I were to advise a new president, I'll say to him, for the 6 months you're going to be waiting, please let them give you by location every mineral, every natural resource we have in Nigeria, and then look at to what extent you're able to do a value. I'll end on this. Look at Ajaokuta. And I want you to imagine, I don't know if you've ever taken a trip into Ajaokuta. Ajaokuta has the capacity to produce two-stroke engines. Ajaokuta has the capacity to produce rail tracks. Ajaokuta has the capacity to retrofit, and I'm saying this on national TV, every transformer, electrical transformer will have, they have that facility built up 100% ready to go. But can I tell you this? There is nothing happening there.
And that would be a controversial statement itself, because this same government, the Buhari-led federal government, said that Ajaokuta was almost completed, and at some point we saw the incumbent governor of Ekiti State, Kade Fayemi, when he was the Minister of Solid Minerals, taking some trips and telling us that, look, this Ajaokuta is going to work before the exit of this administration. Can we say that it has ended up being another white elephant project again? Why don't you
take a camera to Ajaokuta? It's 2 hours from here, and I'll accompany you so that you can tell Nigeria and say this one, look at what this fool said to me. You see all the things happening here. I will go on that trip. Well, okay, so it's important we begin to, it's important we begin to look at, nobody is calling out anybody. It is for us to be able to give the proper focus on probably the new administration that's coming. And in the document that the governor shared, I didn't see, where they were talking about us looking at our natural resources as a new economic pathway. I didn't see where they talked about us, returning back our dysfunctional, public funded facilities, which runs in thousands. About 8,000 of them are abandoned all over the country. The poultry that the Fayose administration was building in Ekiti State was supposed to be the biggest, in West Africa, integrated to a feed mill. It was supposed to be hosting about 50,000 beds, if I get my figures right. What has happened to it? So until we begin to, and that's why I said to you, if we don't start by building the statistics of what it is we have and what went wrong with what we had, and it is all about everybody wanting to get into government. I tell this joke about I have a friend in Zimbabwe, and one day we were talking, I said, my friend, you guys have given the white man back his Bible and took his land, or they took your land that he took from you. And you left the land, and all of you are running into government offices to look for white-collar jobs. At the point in time, Zimbabwe was on their land. It was one of the strongest economies in Africa. Is that not enough to tell us that we are not, the white man is not our problem? I think it is us not understanding that everything you do is all about what you do with your resource and the technologies you apply to it. I remember
when it was called Rhodesia, then Rhodesia was known well with food and all of that. And I come to you, Dr. Sam Amadi. I'm going to pose a question to you, which I'll eventually pose to Akin, on the issues of young Nigerians who are well talented, they have tech skills and all of that. There's a new song in town that's called Jakpa. That's how it's called. A lot of young Nigerians who are well-talented are leaving the country. I mean, within this window of August and September, most financial institutions in Nigeria are going to be losing a lot of critical human power that have to do with, technology and all of that. How do we ensure that this brain drain doesn't affect our economy in the midst of all of these dwindling fortunes that we are facing? Because, I mean, you look at some fintech companies and some banks in Nigeria, their tech platforms are not functional because we're losing these young people to other countries.
I think we should actually say, how do we ensure that the Nigeria bad economy does not affect, furthermore, the human capital, the brain of these young people? Interestingly, I've been one who opposes and discourages people from the country. But just last week, I have to financially support a young lady to leave the country, in spite of all, attempt to discourage her. And then things get worse, and then you begin to see yourself as a sadist if you don't allow these people to move to where they can actually have a comfortable life. Now, let's get to three things. My friend Emeka talks about data, very critical. But after data, you talk about Ajaokuta Lewis, the first black Nobel economist, laid 3 points about development. One, economic development. One is what they call economizing. And that's what we're talking about, the sense that you need to know that you need to grow your resources, use it to convert it to value, and then reduce the cost and increase the output. The second is institutions and human capital, which is where the question comes to. Now, look at this way. When I was in Foreign Affairs, we talk about brain drain becoming brain gain. So we see these people coming back and setting up the fintech, sales, all this. Now, most of those guys who set up startups, go back and look at the status of those startups. Maybe one or two can make it. The rate of debt of startups in Nigeria is very high because of funding opportunities, because of access to knowledge, because of mentoring, because of institutional enablement. Now, take that and look at Taiwan. Today, Taiwan has the biggest market for semiconductors. If you look at any of the luxury bicycles, Taiwan provides much of the high-end part of that. That's like their industry. And what they do different, you see, they created hubs, industrial clusters, around institutions, around communities of people who are learning. Not necessarily they have to have high-end expertise, but people who are smart enough. And then they integrated it back to financing, back to policy, back to market. So clear, what is missing is a planned economy, not in the classical sense in which neoliberals have proposed the notion of Africa, Marxism, but planned in terms of strategic focus on harnessing natural resources, human resources. Now, if you look at the Nigerian youths, okay, when they go out of the country, we talk about he made first class, he was the best guy. We look at Philippo, I think Ozua, what is it called? The guy who gave us 700 million naira equivalent support to UI. They went to Nsukka, they went to Ife, they went to Ibadan. But what is missing is a sense of a society that values talent and knowledge, and that is really willing to commercialize knowledge, which is where I talk about innovation. So we have a science and tech ministry with a reputable engineer, professor, or at least a lecturer who headed it. But we didn't see anybody move a needle. We have digital economy. What we say every day is only about NCC and some, pedestrian regulation. How do you energize a digital economy, harness this brain power and use it? Another point that we miss is that, and I want Emeka to look at it, is the political economy of this resource utilization, whether human or resource. Now look at our constitutional framework. We keep collecting money from FAC every month. There's no structural incentive for people to create things because there's value. You create, you see, every society that has innovated was a society that, whether in terms of property rights or in terms of IT protection, is a notion that people are incentivized to create. And they have a sense of taking more value when they create than when they don't create. So if you run a political economy that's focused on giving people more who don't create and punishing those who create, there's no sense in which you can have this resource optimization. So the young people will leave this country because this is a country that's not focused at helping them flourish in terms of using their brain power. We are all talking about Musa, great guy, great lady, doing great. But look, if you audit the component of that success that is due to enablement, sports facility, sports counseling, sports enablement, all kinds of things that go into sports science. And the company that is raw skills and raw determination, it discovered that maybe Nigeria shouldn't have a bragging right over our success. So really, that's
over the medals that we've seen her winning for the country. All right, and I come to you as we try to look for new revenue streams for the country. Ogunshola, should we take these young people who are going out of the country as a source of funding for the country too, through diaspora remittances and all of that? I mean, can we make some gain out of it economically for the benefit of the country, just the way India did, although many of these people are moving out of anger? But how do we make something good out of a bad situation?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. I think the problem that we have for the Nigerian youth is that the curriculum that actually trained the Nigerian youth actually trained them to be job seekers, to finish from school and begin to apply for jobs here and there. Most of the Nigerian youths that passed through the Nigerian universities, they were not trained to actually be entrepreneurs, to actually identify opportunities out of serious situations. And that's why you see people that have CVs, they feel, okay, since we are unemployed in Nigeria, there's no job, why don't we go seek job in other countries where we get job? Now, what happened? 2000, in the past government of President Jonathan, there was Shopee training for Nigerian youths. Nigerian youths were trained through the Shopee program. At the end of the day, Nigerian youths were asking for capital to actually start up businesses, which they didn't get because of the situation of accessing funds from the microfinance banks and other sources. So the problem we have with the Nigerian youth is that they have been trained to actually look for job and not to create job. And we need to actually reorient our youth and make them to know that no matter how bad the situation is, there is always an opportunity, there is always a business to do. If you go to Afghanistan, even the place that bombs is being blown every day, I think there's even some business opportunity there. People are still surviving and doing business there. So it's just to encourage Nigerian youth that they shouldn't give up on the Nigerian project. They should just stay back and see that there's something good. If you ask me again, I can tell you for free that if you look at the airlines, the foreign airlines that travel back down to Nigeria, you see white people coming to Nigeria to do business. Despite we in Nigeria, we are not seeing the opportunities. We are not taking advantage of what we have. And the problem again that we have is that we have enough leakages in Nigeria. And that's what is affecting the Nigerian economy. We have oil being stolen by thieves. We have gold, illegal miners here and there. And government is not doing anything about these things. And they are complaining that revenue is actually going down. Definitely revenue will go down because this revenue is actually going into some people's pocket. It's not circulating to the Nigerian youth, and nobody is doing anything about that. And the Nigerian youth that is trained to look for job and is not getting the job, the foreign direct investment, foreigners that expect to establish business, they are even going out of Nigeria. The Nigerian youth are losing hope on the Nigerian project. So we just need to encourage them and actually do a kind of reorientation so that we can make them to see the opportunity that they are not seeing. Other people are seeing opportunity in Nigeria, I can tell you, but the Nigerian youth are not seeing them.
I'll just ask you, Ogunshola, to hold on there while we go on this short break, and when we come back, the conversation continues. How do we grow our economy? How much of a deep trouble are we? And then how do we ensure that the next government that's going to succeed the Buhari administration provides or has a platform that it wouldn't give it opportunity to complain that lacks the finances to be able to engage on meaningful projects. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Arise interview, where we speak to the newsmakers as well as ordinary people doing extraordinary things around the world and featuring the voices at the heart of conversations. I'm Somna Sambo, and the conversation continues with Dr. Emeka Okengwu, who's a development economist and a former consultant with the World Bank, Dr. Sam Amadi, who's a Arise analyst and associate professor of law, and Ken Ogunshola, who's an economic expert. And then we'll just move on to other suggestions that have been offered, by governors to the federal government, and then, of course, several other persons. Now, to improve tax revenues, they suggested that the federal government should introduce a flat 3% federal personal income tax on all Nigerians earning more than 30,000 naira per month, adding that persons earning less than 30,000 naira per month, whether employed or not, including farmers and traders, should pay a monthly FPIT of 100 naira, one of the taxes. And similarly, telecoms firms and the National Identity Management Commission should collaborate to ensure deduction of this from phone credit of individuals and linking to the NIN and BVN. The governors also suggested centralization of the collection of all federal oil and non-oil taxes in one agency, that's the FIRS, while customs, MPA, that's the Nigerian Ports Authority, and others assess and issue demands. Now, they suggested that the federal government should improve crude oil and gas production, resolve lingering issues of ownership of gas in the production sharing contracts, and then to help position Nigeria to take advantage of the gas needs in Europe based on the war that's ongoing there, and provide incentives to expedite development of vandalism-resistant deep offshore fields like the Bonga, Southwest Shell, and then Priowe, Zabazaba, and Owowo oil fields and all of that. And I come back to you, Dr. Okengwu. These are some of the suggestions. What do you make of it as we try to see how Nigeria survives this economic downturn? I
didn't see the removal of security votes. Should have been on that list. I didn't see the reduction of the size of government at the sub-nationals. Should have been part of it. You see, Soma, steel is development and development is steel. Any nation that does not develop its capacity, okay, to produce its own steel, if it has those, competencies or resources, run the risk of being dependent on other people for their development. Look at us, 3 billion tons, or 3 billion tons of iron ore littered all over this country. In fact, at one time, the Zamfara State government, under Governor Shinkafi then, was trying to build a cargo airport against the iron ore in Zamfara State, which was one of the best they found then. Now, you're not talking about the Kurutun Cafe Hills, which is about 1 million or billion metric tons of iron ore. They didn't mention that. Look at Ngala Dikwa in Yobe, Borno State, which is where you have probably what you might consider the poorest Nigerians today, that has 900 million metric tons of bentonic clay that can now be used to provide the bentonite or produce bentonite. They didn't mention that. And you're forgetting that we have what we call the pay as you earn. Okay, now how are you going to, what infrastructure do you have? Are we going to go back to those old days where my father and your father was climbing trees because of a tax man? How are you going to start collecting these taxes? What infrastructure do you have to collect them? And, people are strained already. Okay, you're asking a man to pay 100 naira out of what he doesn't have, and then you are driving around in 10, 5, 8 SUVs. Yeah, and,
okay, they're also suggesting that the VAT should be moved to 10%.
So I mean, what is this? We have not seen any of them. So, okay, all these retirement benefits that the governors, don't you think that leadership should start from, the leaders making sacrifices and then begin to now build that, okay, we actually know what it is you want. Why aren't they suggesting that we do a scoping study to actually even understand, have some kind of understanding of how many people in Nigeria are actually living under this breadline? Well, depending on World Bank statistics. Well, have we done any internal, audit ourselves? So, when you talk about these things, they look very glossy, and we are trying to offer help. But let me offer you one very simple way to do
very
this.
quickly, as our time is going.
The university systems is where we'll start. My brother Ogunlola, please, if you have a chance to leave this country at your age, you better leave. I beg you.
Well, Ogunlola, he's asking you to leave the country.
I am forcing you to.
I don't know. I want him to react to that.
If your wife is listening,
shouldn't leave.
Stop giving you food until you agree to leave.
Okay, so what would be your response? And as you try to also say more about some of those solutions being offered by the governors to the federal government.
To me?
Yes. Are you leaving or not? And then, of course, what do you have to say about that?
I had several opportunities to actually leave Nigeria, but I said I won't leave because I believe in the Nigerian project. I believe that Nigeria is better than the UK. Nigeria can be better than the UAE. Nigeria can be greater, can be the greatest country in Africa, except if we all agree to actually put all hands on deck to fix our country. We can't leave Nigeria and be doing second-class citizens in UK, in America, and all that, when we are actually blessed here. That is just my position today. I'm not leaving Nigeria.
Okay.
I enjoy going for holiday and coming back to Nigeria.
So very quickly, before I come to Dr. Sam Amadi, what do you make of the recommendation for a 10% VAT when they just moved from 5 to 7.5%?
At all. It is not the time to increase VAT at all. We have actually increased to 7.5 just within 2 years, and we're already clamoring to add another 2.5. It is not the right time because we are not in the best economy. People are already saying the cost of doing business is actually very high. And you know, VAT is a consumption tax. It is the final consumer, you and I, that actually bears that kind of tax. While some other rich men, the billionaires, they are paying the same amount with us. So I don't think VAT is the way to go. Number two, the personal income tax that they are saying they should add, personal income tax is not a way to go now, because the workers in Nigeria are already overtaxed and underpaid. If you convert the average minimum wage of a Nigerian worker, 30,000 naira, into dollars, you will know that is actually still below the poverty line. So we cannot increase the personal income tax. Number one.
Unfortunately, we don't have enough time left. I just want Dr. Sam Amadi to say something about this proposal for Nigeria to take advantage of the need for our gas by the European Union, of course, and then, of course, the Bonga oil field suggestion and all of that. What do you make of the governor's
I think on the face of it, it's sensible. I mean, it's a concession to the idea that we can't control our pipeline vandalism, so we need to move further down shore where they cannot engage in. Again, centralizing FIRC, centralizing everything in terms of revenue is a good one. You need, we talk about tax, optimal tax, but we need optimal tax system. The tax administration is a critical part of economic development. You have to be sure it's transparent, it's accountable, and you collect auditors you can collect. Now, the oil sector, this PIA was supposed to be a big bank to open the door to investment. Look at the investment corridor. Less is coming to Nigeria. Of all the foreign investment into the oil and gas sector in Africa, we're getting less and less because of lack of transparency, because of lack of certainty around our policy framework. This government should have been big on transparency. Up to today, NNPC is still a question of jigsaw. Are they open? Are they not open? Are they remitting? Are they not remitting? So we need to do the basic thing, like Emeka said, and that's very important. And by the way, this is the key point here. There are many options of growing this economy, but those options require stepping away from the Nigerian consumer political economy. No governor has the incentive to make the kind of intellectual investment in those minerals. Niger State has so many minerals, all the states in this country. So we can't go there because the oil wealth is there to share, and it's small lifting, heavy lifting required in terms of concept, ideas, and planning to tap into that hidden wealth and grow the country. So the tax regime is not appropriate. In real terms, we have less tax our tax to GDP is low, which means we can actually tax more.
I'm afraid I just have to cut in
but we can't,
our own Dr. Sam Amadi. I can tell you that the job for the next president of Nigeria is very tough, and of course we have to continue this conversation even during the election on where the next monies will be coming for our new government to be able to run the country effectively in the midst of insecurity, dwindling economy, and all of that. And of course the idea of having foreign aircraft coming to the country with lots of people but going empty, especially the cargo aircraft, it's a big issue that we all have to look into. Well, we must thank you so much, Dr. Sam Amadi, who is a Rise News analyst and, of course, an associate professor of law, for being on the show with us. And, of course, our own Dr. Emeka Okengwu, I'm appropriating you to us here because you've given us some very great points here. A former World Bank consultant and, of course, a development economist. We must thank you for joining us on the show. And, of course, Akin Ogunshola, the man who has been begged right here on set not to go out of the country. We must thank you for staying with us and, of course, for giving hope to a lot of Nigerian youths who are looking for papers to just move out of the country. We must thank you so much for being on the show. Well, that's how it's been for this edition of the Arise interview. I'm Sumner Sambo. Join us again tomorrow. See you then.